I stood beside my husband, a plastic grocery bag biting into my palm, as our son stared through us like we were tenants who'd overstayed our welcome. "We're remodeling," he said, eyes already looking past us. "She wants the front wall opened up. No thank you, no memory of the down payment we made. No room for the people who raised him." We left with nothing but a folder of papers. He gutted the house. We used those papers to gut his claim to it. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. I don't remember what started the shouting. Maybe it was the way Ryan kicked the recycling bin out of his path. Or maybe it was Amber's smug little shrug when Frank asked why there were already paint samples on the living room wall. But I remember how it ended. "I want you out," Ryan said, arms folded, mouth tight. "Tonight, we're remodeling. Amber wants the front wall opened up." Remodeling. That was the word he used. Like we were a pile of old carpet they were ripping out. Like it hadn't been our home first. Frank didn't yell. He stood frozen near the kitchen doorway, jaw clenched, a look in his eyes I hadn't seen in a long time, back when his dad left, and the mortgage almost swallowed his mother whole. I knew better than to try to calm him. My own heart was pounding in my throat. Amber showed up with the bags, grocery store kind. A dozen white plastic sacks looped around her wrist. "Just pack what you really need," she said, with that same fake bright voice she always used when people were watching. "Travel light. It'll be easier." "Is this a joke?" I asked her. "You're evicting us with Safeway bags?" "It's temporary," she said. "You can leave the rest. We'll set it aside while construction's going on. You'll get it back." I wanted to scream, to knock something over. But Frank didn't even look at her. He stepped past me, walked into the den, and opened the drawer under the old stereo. The folder was there, blue plastic, frayed edges, stuffed with papers we'd kept since the start. The loan cosigner docs, the maintenance receipts, the proof of the down payment we made before Ryan's name was ever on the deed. Frank didn't say anything as he held it. Just turned it in his hands, like he was making sure it was real. I looked at him. "Keep the folder," I said. "It's the only thing we'll still own tonight." Outside, the sun had gone down hard, a dusty red behind the fence. Lucy was on her porch across the street, arms crossed over her chest, lit cigarette bobbing at her lip, watching. She didn't wave, didn't yell, didn't come over, just stared, like a witness, like she'd been waiting for this. We didn't pack much, a few clothes, my laptop, the folder. Frank left the framed photo of his mother on the bookshelf, paused at the last second like he might grab it, then didn't. I wanted to ask why, but I think I knew. You don't bring family into a place like where we were going. Ryan held the door open, didn't say a word, just stared through us like we were tenants overstaying our lease. He had one hand on Amber's lower back the whole time, claiming territory. I didn't look back when the door slammed. Frank drove. We didn't talk. The night bled out across the windshield, strip malls turning to industrial lots, then to a long stretch of nothing. I held the folder in my lap, gripping the edge so hard the plastic creaked. We ended up at a place off the 8, El Camino Motor Lodge, in flickering neon. Half the sign burned out, the kind of motel where you pay in cash and don't ask questions. The room smelled like mildew and old cigarettes. There was a stain on the carpet near the bed, the kind that made me keep my shoes on. Frank sat down hard on the mattress, ran both hands down his face, and didn't move. I stood by the window, not pulling the curtains closed yet. I could still see the freeway. Still hear the whoosh of cars going somewhere else, anywhere else. "I'm sorry," I said finally, not sure if I meant it for him or for myself. He didn't answer. And then, as I turned to sit beside him, I noticed something in the folder had shifted. A piece of paper stuck out, not like the others, different paper stock, crisp, newer. I pulled it halfway out. A notarized form, signed. Recent date. Ryan's name on the deed, alone. The motel bedspread was stiff and patterned with some kind of gold and maroon floral that looked like it hadn't been washed since the Bush administration. I peeled it back and laid out the folder's contents across the flat sheet, smoothing each page with the side of my hand. I didn't say anything yet. I needed to see it all again, in one place, in the right light. Frank was still sitting at the edge of the bed, hands loose between his knees, staring at the wall like he could burn a hole through it. He hadn't taken off his shoes either. I lined up the tax bills first, all with our names on them, then the co-sign paperwork, then the printout from when we refinanced last year. Frank's credit had carried it. Ryan had just signed as an add-on. I could still remember the conversation, how Ryan had laughed about not needing to be on every single page. I remembered thinking it was careless, but now I wasn't so sure. I guess it's something, Frank said finally. His voice was thin, like it was passing through fog. At least we left with proof. Proof of what? I asked. That we're suckers who helped him build equity before he shoved us out the front door? He didn't answer. I could hear the plumbing groan from the next room, someone running a shower or flushing something down. The ceiling buzzed faintly from the neon sign outside. We weren't going to sleep. We both knew that. My phone buzzed. It lit up on the nightstand. Lucy? I answered on the second ring, voice low. Hey. I'm sorry, she said immediately. I should have come over. I didn't know what to do. You did the right thing, I said. You saw it. I saw everything. And Carolyn? Listen. I want to help. Ryan's shady as hell, and Amber's no better. I know a guy at the county clerk's office. We'll pull everything he filed, back to the original deed. I mean it. Whatever he did, we'll find it. I didn't realize I'd started crying until Frank looked up. Thank you, I said. Really, she said she'd call in the morning. She had a plan. I believed her. Lucy didn't make promises lightly. We hung up. I was still holding the phone when the push notification pinged. Instagram. I opened it without thinking. And there it was. A picture. Amber, barefoot in our kitchen, now empty. Cabinets gutted, paint peeled halfway off the wall. Ryan stood behind her, holding a sledgehammer like a trophy. She was smiling with her whole face. The caption read, "New chapter, fresh start. Our home." I stared at it for a long time. Then I took screenshots, one, then another, then scrolled and grabbed the rest. Everything she'd posted that week. Every smug little post about vision boards and gratitude and starting over with love. I saved them all into a folder on my phone labeled Evidence. Frank leaned forward and picked up one of the pages I'd left face down. I watched his brow crease. What is it? I asked. He turned it toward me. It's that deed you found last night. Ryan's name alone, yeah? Yeah. He pointed at the bottom margin. I hadn't noticed it before. Maybe I'd been too shaken. There was a note at the bottom, typed small. Quitclaim deed. Never executed. I sat up straighter. What does that mean? He looked at me, eyes clearing. It means the transfer never went through. It wasn't finalized. The county never recorded it. The air shifted in the room. It was subtle, but I felt it. Like someone had opened a window just a crack. If it's not executed, I said slowly, then it's not legal. Frank nodded once. It means the house might still be ours. I looked back at the photos, still glowing on my phone. Amber, so sure. Ryan, hammer in hand. Let them swing. Let them post. Because if what Frank just said was true, they weren't just remodeling our home. They were destroying their own evidence. The county office was one of those squat, beige buildings that felt stuck in time. Fluorescent lights, dusty blinds, linoleum floors worn to a shine from decades of tired footsteps. We got there just after 9 a.m., clutching coffee cups and the blue folder like it was a passport out of limbo. Lucy was already waiting inside, leaning against the front desk with a clipboard in one hand and her phone in the other. She gave us a tight nod as we walked in. No makeup, hair pulled back, like she'd skipped her morning routine to get here before us. Good timing, she said. Clerk's just finishing up the poll. I'd barely slept the night before, and Frank looked worse. But there was a different kind of charge in the air now, a direction, a sense that maybe we weren't just reacting anymore. A woman in glasses and a forest green cardigan came around the partition with a slim stack of papers. Carolyn Fisher? She asked. That's me. She handed them over with a nod. This is everything filed under that parcel since 2018. You can request certified copies at window 4. I scanned the top sheet. It was a list of all actions on the property, refinances, liens, escrow closures. I flipped to the most recent entry. March 14th. It was the quitclaim deed we'd found in the folder. Drafted, I said aloud. But no record of it being processed. Lucy leaned over my shoulder. Exactly, they generated the form. But no signature on file, no stamp. It was never submitted. Chain of titles still in your name. Frank didn't speak at first. He just let out a slow exhale, eyes focused on the paper like he was afraid it might disappear. So we're not squatters, I said, voice low. We never were, Lucy said. Frank finally cracked a small, uneven smile. Then we're not homeless, he murmured, just misplaced. It hit me harder than I expected, like my lungs were suddenly allowed to fill again. We took a seat near the window while I filled out the request forms for certified copies. I ticked every box, every document they had: title, tax history, original loan papers, the unfiled quitclaim. If we were going to make a case, we'd need all of it. Not just to prove we had a right to the house, but to prove we never gave it away. Lucy offered to take everything to a paralegal she knew. But Frank had someone else in mind. David Ramos, he said as we walked to the car. He handled my mom's estate. Guy's smart. Didn't charge me a dime until the check came through. I nodded. Let's set it up. David's office was on the second floor of a converted Craftsman near Old Town. He had the kind of setup that said he didn't waste money on image. Just 2 leather chairs, a bookshelf filled with thick binders, and a quiet calm that made you want to trust him. He was in his 50s, maybe, with salt and pepper hair and reading glasses he kept perched halfway down his nose. Frank introduced me, and I handed him the folder. He didn't rush. He flipped through each page slowly, mouth twitching once in what might have been surprise. Then again as he found the county file. You kept this all? He asked. Every scrap, I said. Since day one. He leaned back in his chair, tapping the top corner of the deed. You don't see that much anymore. People sign stuff. They trust what's on the screen. They never ask for copies. You two? You kept the gold mine of paperwork. Frank cleared his throat. So, what are we looking at? David took off his glasses and set them on the desk. We're looking at something you can fight. If the title never legally transferred, and you've got paper trail and witness support, you have a claim. A strong one. I felt a rush behind my eyes and blinked it back. I couldn't afford to cry in front of another stranger. Not yet. There's one thing I need to check, he added. A gap in the title insurance file. It could tell us whether Ryan tried to cover his tracks. I looked at Frank, then back at David. What kind of gap? I asked. He smiled faintly, almost grim. The kind that tells me whether this was a mistake. He tapped the folder again, right over Ryan's name. Or a setup. David called us back less than 24 hours later. Come in, he said. Bring the folder. When we walked into his office, he didn't offer coffee. Didn't waste time. Just motioned for us to sit, closed the door behind us, and turned around with a thin stack of papers in his hand. I pulled the records from San Diego Gas and Electric, he said. Under California law, utilities can require proof of ownership before approving major service changes, especially during renovations. Guess what Ryan submitted? He held up a scanned copy. The form looked official, stamped, dated 2 weeks ago. Claimed sole ownership, David said. Use the same quitclaim we found. Only this one, he tapped the signature line, was forged. Frank leaned in. Forged? David nodded. I checked with the notary whose seal appears on it. She was suspended in 2021. Didn't renew her license, which means the stamp is invalid, and the notarization is illegal. Whoever did this photocopied an old seal and slapped it on. I felt my stomach turn. David turned toward his keyboard, typed quickly, and swiveled the monitor so we could see. This morning, I filed an ex parte injunction with the Superior Court, requesting immediate halt on any sale, refinance, or third-party renovation until ownership is resolved. He looked at us squarely. You've got standing now, legal and civil. You're not just contesting a mistake. You're accusing fraud. Frank blinked a few times, like he was trying to process the shift. They can't sell it? I asked. Not legally, and if they try, we'll have them in court before escrow closes. I reached into the folder and pulled out the thinner sleeve I'd been keeping separate. Older docs, some faded, one even printed from a dot matrix printer. I slid it across the desk. This might help. David flipped through it, paused when he hit the page I knew would stop him. It was a notarized mortgage release from 1998, handwritten entries, county recorder's seal in blue ink, and a typed letter from the bank stating the original lien had been fully satisfied under the original co-ownership agreement. He exhaled slowly. "You kept this?" I nodded. 3 copies, one in the fireproof box, one in the folder, one scanned in my email. Frank gave me a side glance, eyebrows raised. "You saved everything in triplicate. I was raised by a woman who filed birthday cards by year. It rubbed off." David smiled for the first time. "Good. Because paper beats possession every time." He took the document and slipped it into a new legal file he was building for the case. This proves not only original ownership, but that no outstanding debt was ever transferred or inherited by Ryan. It anchors your chain of title. There was a quiet moment, the kind that feels like a breath before a bigger storm. Lucy arrived 15 minutes later, still in her work polo from the real estate office. She sat down across from David, legs crossed at the ankle, calm but ready. "I read the whole file," she said. "You'll need a witness, right? Someone who saw them force Carolyn and Frank out. Someone who heard Ryan call it his house. I'll testify." Frank looked at her for a long beat. "You sure?" She nodded. "It's one thing to watch something wrong happen. It's another to know it might actually matter if you speak up." David gave her a grateful nod, then opened a drawer and pulled out a pre-filled form. "Here's the affidavit," he said. "We'll notarize it here, your statement in writing in court." Lucy signed without hesitation. Outside the window, the street was starting to glow in the late afternoon sun. People going about their lives like nothing had shifted. But everything had. David stood and pressed the folder closed, firm, like he was sealing something in. "We'll keep the pressure quiet for now," he said. "Let them think you walked away." "And when they realize we didn't?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "They'll panic. That's when people get sloppy." I reached into my bag to put the folder away when my phone lit up. Ryan. Missed call. Then a second one. No voicemail. Then a text. "We need to talk tonight." I didn't answer Ryan's text. Not because I didn't have anything to say, God knows I had pages, but because I already knew what it meant. He'd felt the ground shift and was trying to patch the cracks before they widened. It was too late. David didn't waste time the next morning. He emailed the cease and desist letter directly to the listing agent and CC'd Ryan's personal Gmail. The language was sharp, clinical, and exact. "Pursuant to the filing of a property dispute and pending outcome of legal injunction, all sale or transfer activities related to parcel ID 343280700 must be suspended immediately." At 11:42 a.m., the MLS listing for the house went offline. By 1, the realtor had called Ryan. By 2:15, Ryan called me. This time, he left a voicemail. "You made your point," he said, voice tight. "But you're screwing with something bigger than yourself now. We have a buyer in place. You're going to ruin this." That was the moment I knew we'd finally gotten under his skin. I filed the police report that afternoon. Fraudulent transfer attempt, forged notarization, and unlawful eviction. David said it probably wouldn't result in criminal charges, not yet, but it would create a public record. And that mattered. Even if they bury it, he said, it leaves a trail. Courts like trails. Frank came with me, even though he hates official buildings almost as much as he hates small talk. We sat in the waiting area under a dusty flag and filled out our statements longhand. He kept his hand on my back the whole time. "They threw us out," he said quietly, more to himself than me. "Now they're the ones out." And that's exactly what it looked like when we drove past the house later that evening. The construction crew was gone. The dumpster had been hauled away. The ladder Amber had posted in her Instagram story that morning was still leaning against the gutted front porch, but no one was using it now. A white laminated notice was taped to the mailbox post. We pulled over and read it from the curb. "Attention. Property currently under ownership dispute. Pending legal resolution. All renovation and sale activity is subject to injunction. Entering the premises may be considered trespassing." Amber's car wasn't in the driveway. Ryan's truck was parked half on the lawn. The window upstairs, the one that used to be part of our reading nook, was wide open with a ripped tarp flapping in the breeze. It looked like the skeleton of something half-finished and already abandoned. Frank crossed his arms. Looks about right. We didn't stay long. Just long enough to feel the weight shift again. The house had always been more than a structure. It was memory, legacy. Proof that we'd built something worth protecting. Now, it was also leverage. That night, I sat at the small table in the motel kitchenette, with the folder open in front of me and a highlighter in hand. I was cataloging every item, creating an index spreadsheet with matching timestamps and document codes. I didn't trust memory anymore. I needed paper, process. Lucy called around 9. You heard about the crew. I saw it, I said. She whistled. They're pissed. One of the guys posted in a contractor Facebook group, said the client stopped paying, said the permits were in limbo. Apparently Amber threw a fit in the driveway, cried. Blamed Ryan. She'd better start blaming herself. Just don't let them draw you out, Lucy warned. They're going to get desperate now. That's when people cut corners. I hung up and turned back to the spreadsheet. The quiet was thick, but not heavy anymore. It was the sound of traction, of facts replacing panic. Then came a knock at the door, not loud, just 2 sharp raps. Frank looked up from the bed. You expecting anyone? I wasn't. I walked slowly toward the door and checked the peephole. The hallway was empty, but on the floor, carefully placed against the frame, was a sealed envelope. No return address. I bent down, picked it up. Inside, a single sheet of paper, typed. No greeting, no signature, just one line. You might want to stop digging. I didn't sleep much after the envelope. Frank offered to sit up with me. But I told him to rest. I stayed at the table, the note beside me like a stray tooth someone left behind. Blunt, anonymous, meant to intimidate. But it only made me more certain we were getting close to something they wanted buried. By morning, David had already seen it. Let them threaten, he said flatly. We'll answer with paperwork. That's how you fight cowards like this. He didn't mean just the envelope. He meant all of it. Every move Ryan had made in the dark. Every lie hidden behind new paint and polished captions. That afternoon, we met them face to face. It was at the courthouse, neutral ground. David called it a last courtesy before filing the next round of motions. Ryan showed up wearing a suit that didn't quite fit. Amber stayed in the car. He didn't say hello, just came at us hard. You're ruining everything, he hissed the moment we stepped into the hallway outside the clerk's office. You know that? You've made this a circus. You could have walked away clean, but instead you... We kept the mortgage release, I said calmly, cutting through his noise. He blinked. What? From 98. The one that proves our equity and voids any future lien transfer. You never even looked at the old file drawer, did you? David didn't wait. He stepped forward and handed Ryan a stamped notice. Effective immediately, we filed a quiet title action on behalf of my clients. Your name's not on the original deed. The forged quitclaim you submitted was never recorded. Your utilities claim is fraudulent. And we now have multiple notarized statements, one dating back 27 years, that support our case. Ryan stared at the papers, unblinking. This isn't over, he said finally. No, Frank said from behind me. Now it is. It moved fast after that. David filed everything just before the courthouse closed. The quiet title suit, the affidavit of forgery, and the request for temporary possession under hardship claim. Lucy delivered her witness statement the next morning, signed and notarized. She'd found an old file at her office, a copy of the original closing from 1998, where she'd been present as an intern. It had our signatures, our payments, and a copy of the title insurance policy still in force. She brought it to David herself. You're sure you want this on the record? He asked. She didn't even flinch. I'd sign it twice if I could. 3 days later, we got the ruling. It came in the form of an emergency hearing. Just us, David, and a sleepy court-appointed judge with reading glasses on a chain. Based on the documentation, he said, thumbing through the file, and the absence of legal title transfer, I'm granting temporary possession to the plaintiff's pending resolution of the quiet title claim. He banged the gavel once. The sound echoed through the empty courtroom like punctuation. We won the first round. We pulled into the driveway at 4:12 p.m. The laminated dispute notice had been removed by the county and replaced with a formal one from the Superior Court. Frank reached up and touched it, like he needed to make sure it was real. The house was quiet. No Amber. No Ryan. just the sound of wind passing through the open upstairs window and the faint chirp of a smoke detector somewhere deep inside, the battery gone low in our absence. The front door key still worked. Ryan hadn't changed the locks. We stepped inside like we were crossing a river. The place was a mess. Half-peeled walls, exposed studs, tools left scattered like the crew thought they'd be back any minute. In the kitchen, the fridge hummed faintly, but had been unplugged from the wall, its cord draped across the floor like a dead limb. I walked to the living room and touched the edge of the old bookshelf that had been bolted to the wall. It was still there, empty, but there. Frank set the folder down on the countertop like it was claiming the space again. Then he looked at me. "We came back," he said. And for a moment I let myself feel it. Not victory, not yet, but ground beneath our feet. Then the phone rang. Blocked number. I answered on instinct. A woman's voice, cold, controlled. "You think you've won, but you're not the only ones with paperwork." Click. I found out about the segment from a text alert. Lucy sent a screenshot just after 7 p.m. A still image of the local Channel 6 anchor standing in front of our house. The Chiron read, "Quiet title controversy. Parents versus son in San Diego property dispute." I didn't click the link right away. I just stared at the image. Our home, the broken porch, the construction debris, the taped notice from the court, now framed as some kind of petty family feud. Our humiliation packaged into a 2-minute teaser. Frank came out of the bathroom, drying his hands. Something wrong. They aired it? He didn't ask which it. He just sat beside me on the couch, shoulders tight. I tapped play. The voiceover started soft and sympathetic. A young couple, caught in a legal nightmare. Renovations on hold. Dreams paused. Amber appeared first, standing in front of a patch of stripped drywall. She looked clean, practiced, like she'd rehearsed. "We just wanted to make a home," she said, voice breaking perfectly on cue. "And now, we're being dragged through court by people who should have been proud of us." Then Ryan, stiff, controlled. "This house was supposed to be a gift. They're rewriting history. They blurred our faces in the old photo they used. A print from the wall that must have still been inside when we were forced out. Probably taken during that 4th of July barbecue years ago. The one where Ryan brought Amber as a friend. I barely recognized us." The reporter ended the piece with a line that made my jaw clench. "The case will now move to civil court, but for Ryan and Amber, the damage may already be done." Frank muted the TV. "They're trying to win the court of public opinion." "Let's give them better evidence," I said. I spent the next hour writing a letter, brief, professional, and attached to a certified digital copy of the mortgage release, the original deed, and the notarized witness statements. I addressed it directly to the reporter and CC'd the station's legal desk. I didn't include commentary, just facts. By morning, the online comments had flipped. The station hadn't pulled the story, but they'd updated the caption. "Clarification. Title of property remains under legal dispute. Original deed does not name son as owner." The replies rolled in by the dozens. "So they tried to steal it? Check the court filings before you air lies. Power move by the parents. Respect." I didn't respond to any of them, but I read every single one. David called that afternoon. He didn't ask how I was doing. "I saw the news. You handled it right." "I didn't say anything," I said. "Exactly," he paused. "Stay factual, stay quiet. That's the only way we keep this clean. Ryan's about to get reckless. Let him." The locksmith arrived just after 2 p.m. Frank stood on the porch while the guy drilled out the old deadbolt. Court order in hand. Notarized. Valid. It felt strangely intimate, watching the door we'd been pushed out of slowly surrender back to us. When the new lock clicked into place, Frank exhaled. I saw his shoulders drop for the first time in weeks. "Welcome home," the locksmith said, smiling faintly. Frank looked at me, then stepped inside without a word. We didn't talk much while we swept up the dust. It felt like we were waiting for the next punch. It came that evening. Lucy pulled up with 2 boxes of hardware, 4 exterior cameras, motion-activated floodlights, and a smart lock system with remote access. She opened the back hatch of her car like it was nothing. "You're gonna need eyes on every angle," she said, "especially now." She installed everything herself: ladder, drill, the works. By sunset, we had full coverage. "If they so much as set foot on this lawn," Lucy said, "we'll know." I thanked her the only way I could, with quiet, tired eyes and a hand on her shoulder. She didn't need more. That night, I checked the footage one last time before bed. Each angle clear, each corner covered, the house still. And then, just after midnight, a shadow crossed the back fence. Not fast, not sneaky, just deliberate. A figure paused at the edge of the yard, looked directly at the camera, and held something up. A piece of paper, bold black letters. I zoomed in. "Tell your lawyer to back off. This is family." I woke to David's voice on the other end of the line, tight, clipped, unusually sharp for 6:42 a.m. "Check your email, right now." I sat up in bed, Frank already stirring beside me. I opened my phone and tapped into my inbox. There it was. An official notification from the County Records Department. Subject line: Incident Report, After Hours Entry. Logged attached was a still frame from a hallway camera. Date stamp: last night, 11:03 p.m. Amber, hoodie, ball cap. But unmistakably her. Blonde strands pulled into the same low braid she always wore when pretending to be invisible. She was caught halfway through the records department's side door, keycard in one hand, manila envelope clutched in the other. David didn't wait for me to catch up. She accessed the file room, no court order, no clerk present. She used a contractor's badge, likely borrowed, maybe stolen. Security caught it on camera, and IT flagged a file discrepancy. "Your folder was accessed." Frank swung his legs out of bed. "What does that mean?" "They went after the originals," I said. "The public records." "No," David cut in. "They tried." There was something in his voice, sharp but satisfied. "She didn't get far. County's digital systems back everything up on secure servers with traceable access logs. Anything pulled, copied, or deleted is flagged and mirrored. She might have gotten a look at the hard copies, but your official record's intact." I exhaled, adrenaline rushing to my fingertips. Good thing I made 6 copies. Frank looked at me, eyebrows raised. I held up my hand, ticking off fingers. The original, one for David, one scanned to the cloud, one encrypted on a flash drive in my safe deposit box, one emailed to myself, and one, just for good measure, burned to a CD in the back of the freezer. He smiled, just a little. "That sounds about right." By midday, the incident was under investigation. The clerk from records, Monica, the same woman who'd helped us pull the title history weeks ago, called me directly. She knew exactly what file to go for, she said, rattled. "Didn't touch anything else. Just be careful. This isn't just legal anymore. It's turning into a story." David filed the motion that afternoon. Tampering with public record, intent to interfere with civil proceedings. It was worded carefully, citing chain of custody violations, unauthorized access, and potential fraud. He didn't name Amber outright, but the implication was clear. The court clerk stamped it and sealed it to the ongoing case file. Within hours, we got a call from a detective with the Property Crimes Unit. "Would you be willing to confirm that the individual in the surveillance still is Amber Lynn Torres?" "Yes," I said. No hesitation. They'd already pulled her DMV photo. The matches lined up. Frank and I sat across from each other at the dining table, our house, our chairs, our folder between us, while the detective read the incident summary aloud. It was the first time in weeks the house felt quiet and safe. "I should have seen this coming," Frank said. "She was always the wild card." "She's not the wild card," I said. "She's the fuse." And now someone had lit her. We didn't hear from Amber directly, but the police did. They picked her up at her office the next morning, quietly, no cuffs, just a request to answer a few questions. She was out within the hour. No arrest, no statement. But it was enough. Lucy texted, "They're rattled. One of her coworkers said she's a wreck." I wanted to feel something like satisfaction, but all I felt was the weight of what came next. Because if they were desperate enough to sneak into a records building, it meant one thing: they were out of time. And right before bed, as I was powering down my laptop, an anonymous email hit my inbox. No subject. No body, just a PDF attachment. I opened it. A second quitclaim, backdated, signed in my name. Only this time, the notary wasn't fake. It was someone I recognized, someone we knew. The courtroom was full before we even sat down. I'd expected a few reporters, maybe a clerk with a notepad. But the gallery was packed. Neighbors, lawyers, a few curious faces from the county records office. One woman I didn't recognize clutched a manila envelope and kept glancing toward the door like she was waiting for a cue. Amber and Ryan walked in last. He wore the same suit from the preliminary hearing, but now it looked like it had been slept in. Amber's hair was pulled back tight, her eyes hidden behind dark glasses even inside. She didn't look at me. Frank sat beside me, jaws set. He hadn't said much all morning, but I could feel the current under his silence, some mix of steel and shame. David leaned toward us. Just speak clearly, stay calm. We've already won on paper. Still, it didn't feel won. Not yet. The judge took her seat at exactly 10x a.m. Gray robe, silver hair, firm voice that cut the room like a blade. This is case number CVD 3498, Fisher v. Torres. Motion to establish rightful ownership under quiet title action, review of forged documents, and petition for permanent injunction. She glanced up at us. Mr. Ramos, you may proceed. David stood like he'd done this 1,000 times, because he had. Your Honor, we present a clean and continuous chain of title from 1998 to present, including the original deed, certified mortgage release, and multiple corroborating statements. No legal transfer of ownership to the defendants was ever executed or recorded. In fact, he lifted the blue folder, our folder. The only quitclaim submitted with any signature from my client was backdated and linked to a notary with direct personal ties to the defendants. We believe this to be a deliberate attempt at document fraud. He handed over a thick packet, already stamped and indexed. The judge didn't flinch, just nodded once and turned to me. Mrs. Fisher, take the stand. I didn't stumble, didn't shake. I told it plain. The down payment, the folder, the night we were pushed out with grocery bags. The files Amber tried to erase. The forged notary I recognized, someone we'd once trusted to witness our refinance. The judge listened, not interrupting once. Her face gave nothing away. Then Frank stood. He wasn't polished. He never had been, but his voice was steady. There's one thing I need to add, he said, about the signature on the fake deed. The one they claimed was my dad's. David turned, surprised. We hadn't rehearsed this. Frank continued. My dad was right-handed. Always was. That signature? He looked at the judge. It's slanted left. His letters drag upward. That's a left-handed signature. He paused. Ryan's left-handed. The courtroom didn't make a sound. You could hear the bailiff shift in his seat. David gave the smallest, sharpest nod I'd ever seen. The judge flipped through the file again, then closed it. There is sufficient evidence to support the plaintiff's motion. The quitclaims in question are hereby voided. Full ownership of the property at 1148 Glendale Avenue is reinstated to Carolyn and Frank Fisher, effective immediately. She turned her eyes to Ryan and Amber. You are ordered to vacate the premises and remove all personal property within 72 hours. Any attempt to delay or obstruct this ruling will result in contempt charges. She banged the gavel once. Final, clean, unmistakable. It was done. Outside the courthouse, the sun was too bright, the air too warm for October. The crowd spilled into the plaza, murmuring, dispersing. Amber ducked into a rideshare without a word. Ryan just stood there, watching us. He looked like someone whose mask had finally cracked, but didn't know what to do with the pieces. Lucy was waiting by the sidewalk. When she saw me, she didn't say anything. She just pulled me into a hug that held everything: grief, justice, release. I'm proud of you, she whispered. No one fights this hard unless they've lost more than a house. She pulled back and handed me a folder of her own. What's this? I asked. Her voice was steady, but something flickered beneath it. Your title history, she said. Plus the buyer file Ryan was trying to rush through. There's something in there I think you need to see. I opened the cover. The offer form, the name of the buyer, and below it the agent listed on the file. Lucy McKenna. I don't know what I expected after we won, but it wasn't the silence. 3 days after the hearing, The house was legally ours again. The judge's order came through in clean black letters, and Ryan and Amber were gone by the second morning, left behind a scratched banister, 2 cracked outlet covers, and a cigarette burn in the upstairs hallway. Nothing else. It felt like walking into a house where time had stopped mid-argument. Lucy came by that afternoon. She didn't apologize, not exactly. Just stood in the foyer for a long time, eyes flicking to the half-spackled walls and unfinished stair rail. "I meant to tell you," she said, "but I thought, maybe you'd walk away. Maybe you wouldn't want to fight." I didn't say anything. I just turned to the kitchen, where the linoleum was half torn and the smell of sealant still hung in the air. This house deserved to be finished. So I called a realtor, a real one this time. Her name was Denise Temple, and she didn't blink when I told her what had happened. Just opened her laptop, took photos with her phone, and said, "If you let me stage it right, we'll get eyes on it in 3 days. Even half renovated, you're sitting on equity." The next morning, I posted the listing through her portal. Real photos, real details, nothing hidden. I didn't ask Frank first, but when he saw it, he just nodded once. "I'll manage the crew," he said, and that was that. By the end of the week, we had 8 showings lined up and 2 full-price offers, both from buyers who didn't blink at the unfinished trim or the fact that the upstairs bathroom still had exposed copper piping. People wanted this house. Frank walked through each morning with a yellow pad and a pencil tucked behind his ear. The same man who couldn't look me in the eye a month ago was suddenly back in his element, picking tile, measuring baseboards, calling in favors from old friends who still ran contracting crews. He didn't talk much about what Ryan had done. He didn't need to, but one night, after the last guy had packed up his tools, I found Frank sitting in the driveway, elbows on his knees, staring at the porch light. "I saw his name on a job board," he said, voice quiet. "Ryan. He's applying to HVAC apprenticeships in 3 counties. I waited. Frank looked up at me. "I'm not going to stop him. I'm not going to help him either." I sat down beside him, the concrete still warm from the day. "I'm not angry anymore," I said. And it was true, in a way. The rage had cooled into something harder, clearer. "But I'm not forgetting," he nodded. By mid-month, the house looked like something out of a magazine. Not fancy, not expensive, but whole, finished. Denise called on a Thursday afternoon. "We've got a cash buyer, no contingencies, 15-day close." I said yes. When the wire hit, I sat in the bank parking lot for a long time before going in. The woman behind the glass smiled when I handed her the account information. "This is a new trust?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Fisher Family Trust. I want it protected this time. No co-signers, no POAs, no transfers without dual authorization." She nodded, tapped her keyboard, and printed the confirmation. The money wasn't just digits on a screen. It was the mortgage we'd paid twice, the appliances we'd replaced, the walls we'd painted and repainted. It was everything Amber and Ryan had tried to erase. As I walked back to the car, my phone buzzed. One new email. No subject line. I opened it. The body of the message was blank, but there was an attachment, a photo. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then I zoomed in. It was a scanned purchase agreement. Different address, different buyer, same agent. Lucy, again. And this time, it wasn't my house she was selling. It was Frank's mother's farm, the one she'd said had been off limits. The email address it came from wasn't hers. It was Ryan's. The appeal landed on my porch like junk mail. Certified envelope, thick paper, legal formatting that looked impressive until you actually read it. Amber had filed it under her name alone. No mention of Ryan, no mention of Lucy. Just a 1-page brief accusing the court of improper procedural rulings and bias against female property holders. David texted me before I'd even opened it. "Don't panic, it's desperation. She has no standing." He was right. It was dismissed before the week was out, struck for lack of legal basis and improper filing procedure. The judge didn't even call a hearing, just stamped the order, imposed a fine for abuse of process, and sent the file back down the chain. Amber owed the court $3,000 by month's end. Her silence since then wasn't just avoidance, it was calculation burning down to ashes. The next time I saw Ryan, He was outside the DMV, standing beside a used sedan with a cracked bumper. He didn't see me, just stared at his phone like he was waiting for a message that wasn't coming. Frank told me later that Ryan had been fired from a contractor's assistant gig 2 counties over. Something about dishonesty on his intake form. The marriage, if you could still call it that, was unraveling. Amber had moved into a month-to-month rental in Oakville. Ryan, as far as we knew, was sleeping on a buddy's couch and looking for work under the table. I didn't feel triumphant, just done. And with the house money sitting safe in the Fisher Family Trust, I knew what came next. I made the transfer on a Tuesday morning, sitting in the same bank where the trust was created. $35,000, straight to a nonprofit that restored condemned houses and placed single mothers in subsidized units. It felt strange at first, like giving away a piece of something I'd fought too hard to lose. But Lucy was the one who put it into words. When I told her over coffee, awkward, civil, cautious, she didn't hesitate. "You took a bad roof," she said quietly, "and made shelter for someone else. That's more than justice, Carolyn. That's redemption." We still weren't friends. Too much had broken for that. But we weren't enemies anymore, either. And Frank surprised me. He'd been talking to a condo developer on the edge of town. New build, good insulation, flat rate maintenance. Something simple, close to the park where he liked to walk in the mornings. I didn't push. I just watched as he read through the packet one slow page at a time, glasses sliding halfway down his nose. "It's not a house," he said finally. "But maybe I don't need a house anymore." He signed the purchase papers that afternoon. For the first time in months, his hands didn't shake. I could feel something inside me loosening. Not forgiveness exactly, but freedom. We'd lost years to this, time we couldn't get back. But we weren't stuck anymore. Not in that house, not in that fight. The closing on Frank's condo was set for the following Thursday. We celebrated with pizza on paper plates, surrounded by boxes and the sound of silence finally meaning peace instead of tension. Then, that night, just past 11, my phone lit up. Another email, same anonymous sender, no message, just a subject line this time. "You only looked at one document." I sat up in bed, opened it. There were 3 attachments, all scans, all dated 2 weeks before the trial. The first was another quitclaim deed. Different property, different notary, same forged signature pattern. The second was a buyer agreement. Same buyer from our old house, same date even. The third, it was a notarized power of attorney, filed under Frank's mother's name, effective immediately, granting full financial authority. To Lucy McKenna. He showed up just after noon. No text, no call. Just the knock, 3 soft taps on the front door of the rental where Frank and I were staying until his condo closed. I knew it was him before I opened it. There was something in the air, that unsettled pressure you feel before a storm hits. Ryan stood on the porch, hands in his hoodie pocket, eyes half shut against the sun. "I don't have anywhere else to go," he said. I didn't invite him in. Frank stepped up behind me, silent, not angry, just there, solid as the doorway he stood in. Ryan glanced at him, then back at me. "Can we talk?" I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. The autumn air had turned cold overnight. Sharp wind, brittle light, the kind of weather that reminded you not everything could be fixed with time. "I need a second chance," he said, voice low. "Just one." His hair was longer than I remembered. Not in any purposeful way, just overgrown. His shoes didn't match. "Why?" I asked. He blinked. "Because I messed up. You forged deeds, Ryan. I didn't write the paperwork. I didn't." He stopped himself, eyes darting away like even he didn't believe what he'd started to say. I let it happen, and I didn't stop it." He looked thinner, not in the way that earned sympathy, in the way that spoke of corners cut and days skipped and sleep that wouldn't come. "You didn't just let it happen," I said quietly. "You participated. You lied to a notary. You tried to sell property you didn't own. You threw away a family." He flinched, but didn't look away. "I was trying to build a future. You were trying to skip the line." I could see it hit him, the truth of it. He shifted on his feet. "Amber's gone. She moved in with her cousin. She said I ruined everything. I didn't say anything. I'm trying to get clean, he said, a little too quickly. Off pills. I've been going to those morning groups at St. Margaret's. The wind picked up. I took a breath, then reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the envelope I'd prepared the night before. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't a bridge. It was the court ruling, a notarized copy of the reinstated ownership order, and the terms of the injunction, just in case he needed reminding. He took it without opening it. That's it? He asked. That's it, I said. He glanced past me toward the door. Is Frank really moving into that new place? I nodded. Next week. He rubbed the side of his face like he didn't know what to do with his hands. Tell him I'm sorry. You can tell him yourself. I stepped aside. Frank stood in the doorway, arms crossed. His eyes met Ryan's, but he didn't say a word. For a long second, none of us moved. Then Ryan nodded. Yeah, okay. He started down the steps, envelope tucked under his arm. At the bottom, he turned. I really did love that house, he said, even if I didn't earn it. I didn't answer. He left without another word. Back inside, Frank walked to the kitchen and poured himself a glass of water. His hands were steady. You think he meant it? I asked. Frank shook his head slowly. I think he wants to mean it. We stood there for a while, the house quiet again. Then my phone buzzed. No name, no subject line. Just a single sentence in the body of the email. Lucy isn't who you think she is. And attached, another scanned document. This one signed 2 months before the power of attorney. It wasn't real estate paperwork. It was a hospice intake form. Patient, Margaret Fisher. Power of contact, Lucy McKenna. Primary diagnosis, early cognitive decline. Secondary, suspicious elder isolation. Referral submitted by anonymous tip. Date received 2 days after my first visit with Lucy. I didn't sleep that night. The hospice intake form burned in my hands, even though it never left my inbox. I read it 5 times. Every line, every checkbox, every signature. The date, the timing, the name written in block letters at the bottom. Lucy McKenna. Frank came out around 3 a.m., barefoot, rubbing his temples. He didn't ask what I was looking at. I turned the screen toward him anyway, his jaw tensed, not surprised, just deeply, deeply tired. I knew my mother wasn't herself those last few months, he said. But I never imagined. He stopped, looked down. Lucy said she was just helping with errands. I didn't reply. By morning, we'd both agreed. No confrontation. Not yet. Not until we understood everything. So I made a few calls. One to a private caseworker I knew from my volunteer work. One to the state board that certified hospice intake referrals. And one more to the small law office that had notarized the POA. Within 2 days, I had the answer. The power of attorney Lucy filed hadn't been illegal, not quite, but it had been filed after the hospice flagged concerns about isolation, and before Margaret Fisher's mental decline had been fully documented. It gave Lucy just enough authority to access funds, sign limited documents, and crucially, authorize pre-sale consultations for asset protection, which included listing the farm. That meant Lucy had been acting behind the curtain while Ryan and Amber orchestrated their grift center stage. She hadn't forged anything herself. She'd simply cleared the path. Frank took the news like a man hearing about an avalanche long after it buried the road. Quiet, still. Then he looked up at me and said, "Let's do something good with it." So we did. The Meyer Housing Fund, named after Frank's mother's maiden name, was our way forward. We used the remaining equity from the house sale, the condo Frank had paid off in full, and a modest inheritance from my own parents that I'd kept untouched for years. By the end of the quarter, the fund had over $180,000 in operating capital, enough to seed direct grants, no interest, no collateral for seniors facing predatory eviction or legal confusion over ownership. We hired 2 part-time legal advisors, partnered with a local housing nonprofit, and set up an anonymous intake process. 3 applications came in within the first week, 8 by the second. One woman, 74, had been served with foreclosure paperwork she didn't understand. Turns out her grandson had been secretly refinancing her home. Another couple had been squatting in their own mobile unit after a landlord tried to illegally sell the land beneath it. Frank sat in on every single review. He brought coffee, asked questions. Wrote notes like he was studying for a test no one else knew was coming. I handled the paperwork. And Lucy, she joined the board. Treasurer, by unanimous vote. We didn't bring up the hospice form, not directly, but I think she knew. She showed up early to meetings. She kept the ledgers immaculate. She never once brought up her past real estate license. One day, after we'd approved a $9,000 emergency grant to a woman being harassed by her HOA, Lucy turned to me and said, "We're undoing some of the rot, aren't we?" I nodded. "We are." The Gazette ran a headline that month. Couple turns eviction into aid. Local housing fund quietly rescues dozens. Frank clipped it out and stuck it to the fridge in his new condo. He didn't say much, but I caught him reading it again the next day. Ryan and Amber, for their part, disappeared from public view. No statements, no lawsuits, just digital dust. I heard Amber was working reception at a dental office out in Millersville. Ryan bounced between labor gigs. No one talked about them anymore. But sometimes, I still thought about that day in court. How one signature could shift a whole life sideways. How ours, finally, had built something instead of destroying it. Our papers built roofs again, I told Frank one evening, while sorting the next stack of grants. He just smiled. But that night, while brushing my teeth, I noticed something. An alert from the fund's server. Someone had tried to access our internal portal. Twice. Failed password attempts. IP address. Unfamiliar. Location, Millersville. The sky held just enough warmth to trick us into thinking spring had arrived early. A crowd had gathered, maybe 40 people, maybe more, clustered on folding chairs outside the Meyer Housing Fund's first completed duplex. Beige siding, new gutters, twin welcome mats still wrapped in protective plastic. It wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. The tenants, Mr. and Mrs. Wilkins, both in their 70s, both evicted from a rental they'd paid off twice over, stood beside me on the modest front stoop. Their hands were shaking. Mine were too. I held up the keyring. "This," I said into the small mic clipped to my coat, "isn't just for this door." My voice caught slightly, but I didn't stop. "This key is for safety, for dignity, for the right to close your eyes at night without wondering who's trying to steal the roof above your head." A quiet hum ran through the crowd. Then, one at a time, I handed Mr. Wilkins the keys. He clutched them like they might vanish if he let go. His wife leaned her forehead to his shoulder, and the sound of applause filled the little cul-de-sac. Frank stood off to the side beneath a rented canopy, hands in his jacket pockets, his head tilted just slightly toward the sky. He didn't cry, not fully, but I saw the glint catch in his eyes as the Wilkinses turned the knob and stepped inside their new home. Lucy, or Marion, as she'd started introducing herself again, recorded the whole thing on a DSLR borrowed from the Gazette. "Community series," she'd said when she called last week. "They want to feature a follow-up." I told her fine, but part of me still heard the other shoe in the silence between her sentences. David showed up just before the ribbon was cut, his coat half-buttoned and a thermos in one hand. "You never did take the easy road," he said with a tired grin. "You kept answering my calls," I reminded him. "I should have billed you double," but he didn't mean it. I think, like us, he needed to see how it all landed. The last few weeks had been a blur of paint orders, fire inspections, last-minute zoning clarifications. We hadn't told anyone about the attempted breach on the fund's portal. Not yet, David knew. So did our IT consultant. "Could have been random," he said. "Could have been someone looking to stir up dust just to see who coughs." But neither of us really believed that. Still, today wasn't about Ryan, or Amber, or Lucy's past. It was about this little duplex, the patched sidewalk, the painted mailbox, the lives it would hold. When the speeches ended and the crowd began to drift toward the folding tables set with Costco cupcakes and lukewarm cider, Frank walked over and slipped his hand into mine. "Never thought we'd end up here," he murmured. "Me neither." "I'm glad we did." We watched the Wilkinses peer out from their new window like kids discovering the outside world for the first time. Someone behind us called out, "You two built something beautiful." We turned. It was a woman from the permit office. Her name escaped me, but her smile was honest. "You didn't just fight back. You gave people a way forward." I thanked her, meant it. But inside, something shifted. A memory, something small. The envelope Ryan had taken that day, the one with the court order. I'd tucked it into a plain file, unmarked. But when I opened that same file last night while organizing the grant records, the envelope was missing. Gone. No one else had access, except Frank and Marion. I waited until the house was quiet. Frank had gone to walk the neighborhood. A new habit since the condo. 4 laps, headphones in, sleeves pushed up like he might break into a jog but never did. Lucy had left 2 hours earlier, her camera zipped into its padded case, a folder of press clippings under one arm. She hadn't asked questions when I stepped away mid-celebration. I think she saw it in my face. I needed to finish something. Alone. I carried the final folder into the small office off the living room. It was the same cabinet that once held our mortgage records, the same drawer where I'd kept warranties, appliance manuals, all the hopeful paperwork of a settled life. Now it held deeds, trust documents, grant receipts, a different kind of proof. I slid the folder in, labeled simply closure. Inside was the apology letter from Ryan. He'd dropped it off the week prior, left it with the office secretary, no return address. Handwritten, 8 sentences. Carefully inked, no signature. He admitted nothing specific, claimed nothing dramatic, just regret and the line, "I wish I could have been the son you raised instead of the man I became." I didn't show it to Frank. I wasn't sure I would, but I kept it. Not for sentiment, for the record. We had lived our lives by papers, and I learned the hard way that sometimes they're the only thing that lasts. Outside, I heard the faint clap of a screen door across the street. A family moving in, the Sanchez couple. Young, nervous. Their first place. The woman waved when she saw me through the window. I waved back. Across town, the second duplex was nearly finished. 2 more units after that, then a triplex downtown. Every wall painted with volunteers. Every lease reviewed by our in-house attorney, twice. Lucy had raised a cider glass at the last board meeting. To proof, she said, not promises. Everyone laughed, even David. But it landed heavier than she probably meant. She hadn't tried to explain the missing envelope. I never confronted her about it. And Frank never brought it up. Whether it had been a mistake, a cover, or a last attempt to protect something she'd broken, I let it lie. Some things don't come with answers. Only consequences. Frank came back as the sun started to dip. His cheeks were red, wind-chapped. He stood in the doorway a long moment before sitting beside me at the desk. I opened the top drawer and took out the framed deed. The final one. Stamped, embossed. Unquestioned. "This is the last time we ever have to do this," I said. He nodded. "We lost a house, not a home." He said it gently, like he was giving something back. We sat there, both of us looking at that single piece of paper, weightless, really, but it had carried everything. The fight, the loss, the win. Then softly, like remembering a name from a dream, he said, "You should hang that." So I did. Above the desk, not flashy. Just steady, quiet, honest. The doorbell rang an hour later. It was one of our new tenants, an older man named Glenn, who'd lost his wife last winter. He'd been living in his car when our fund stepped in. He was holding a small basket of muffins. "Just wanted to say thanks," he said, shuffling nervously. "For the house, for the chance." Frank invited him in. We poured coffee. And for the first time in years, the sound in our home wasn't waiting for a door to slam or a lie to drop. It was simple, laughter, light dishes clinking. A man saying thank you. I didn't look at the calendar, didn't calculate how long it had taken to get here. I just looked at the framed deed, the last paper I ever wanted to fight for, the one that proved, without shouting or signatures in red, that we'd rebuilt what was stolen. And in that moment, I finally believed what I hadn't dared say out loud, not even in court, not even to David. My son threw us out with our papers, so I used those papers to make sure he'd never own our home again.